I'm Carrie Penny, and you're listening to Secret Heart Broadcasting. Today on Secret Heart Broadcasting, I am so thrilled to have Dawn Hart in the studio, and I think we're going to do a deep dive on women's hormonal health. Now, Dawn, you're extraordinary, a nutrition. How would you describe yourself? A nutritional. Tell me.
Yeah. So my formal title is
Yes.
a nutritional consultant, and then I'm a fitness coach, and I dabble in the world of speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've got two companies, NutriHeart and
Yeah.
Helia Wellness.
You got it.
And I would say probably the last half of your career, you've been doing a lot of research and
Yeah.
applied research into women's hormonal health.
You got it.
So I'm a woman of a certain age, Dawn Hart. What happens? What happens to our bodies as we age as women?
Yeah, and it's quite a complex conversation, Karen. To keep all listeners nice and alert and not glazing over.
Well, I think if you're a woman of a certain age, you're
yes, we'll
listening.
keep this very
Yes.
succinct.
Yeah.
So the loss of key sex hormones leads to the decline of our health in its entirety. And in that gap, we find a host of different symptoms, all the way from vasomotor issues such as hot flashes, night sweats, to dry genitalia, to mood swings, an inability to metabolize certain foods, food sensitivities. The conversation becomes quite broad.
Yes, and as I've gotten older, I think I've sort of said to you, hey, I can't eat this anymore, or is this normal? But I find that is it true that there just hasn't been a lot of information out there? Like I find I'm reading books that you recommend. I'm talking to my doctor and asking questions. Is it true that there just hasn't been that much information?
Absolutely. So that was one of the driving forces to myself delving into this world of research and information and starting Helia Wellness with my dear friend and colleague, Tracy Fisher. So what we were finding, Care, is that our bodies were changing. Our biochemistry was changing, our brains were changing, and we were noticing the same happen in a lot of the women we were working with. And we thought, this is crazy. Like, this is not coincidence that we're all going through this very, evolving hormonal landscape, and we've got to do better. So we hit the books, started nerding out, to put it lightly, engaged in a copious amount of courses and research, and really to put a stake in the ground and kind of change the narrative, number one, better educate women, number two, and empower them with tools and strategies and knowledge through nutraceuticals or nutrition and lifestyle medicine that they could embrace and embody for, a restored sense of vitality and quality of life.
So where to begin? Because I think, I'll certainly, you're the expert. I'll let you begin, because I don't think we're really prepared for that. My mom didn't say to me, oh, by the way, at menopause, this is going to happen. Like, no one said it,
Yeah.
Yes, and I once actually had an older woman I considered a mentor. I was asking her, hey, did this happen to you? And she was like, oh, have you gone through menopause?
Yeah.
I've never gone through menopause. I don't think that's true.
To this date, even though, despite the information overwhelm available on, different social media platforms and every, magazine article and headline you see to date, because it is trending. The world of hormones and menopause is trending. So that's one thing to acknowledge, which is great, because slowly but surely we're becoming educated, although we're not quite in one lane as clinicians and medical experts yet. There's varying degrees of understanding, practices, and opinions as it relates to HRT and or that evolving hormonal landscape. But to this day, I still have women in their 50s, and I'll circle back on why that's important in a moment, say to me, yeah, I think I might be going through perimenopause. And I'm thinking in my mind, respectfully and lovingly, child, we were going through perimenopause as early as the age of 35.
Wow. So do you want to circle back to that now? Why is that important?
Yeah, so if you just look at the human body, more so a female's body, our ovaries kind of go on strike, so to speak, and stop or reduce the production of a key sex hormone known as estrogen at the ripe age of 51. So a lot of women will meet menopause face to face at that age. And why that's important is a lot of women think they're still in perimenopause, so before menopause, leading up to that point.
All right.
When in fact, we need to start having this conversation with women, and we need to normalize this conversation, in my opinion, as early as the age of 35.
Okay, so we're thinking then the kind of cessation of the last menses as being in menopause. And you're saying that things are happening in the body well before then.
Well before then. And the goal is for us to turn this around, largely so we're educated, so we can do the necessary research and we can get ahead of it, because once menopause happens, we know everything starts closing in, and our options of nutraceuticals, lifestyle management, hormone replacement therapy, and so forth, it just becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. So if we can be proactive and look at this conversation through a really preventative lens, there's far more we can do to embody vitality, well-being, and stave off many, many diseases that come as a result of that declining hormone.
Okay, and we're not looking at menopause as a disease at all. This is a natural. That's right. A natural thing that happens to all women.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because many women will look at menopause as a disease.
And I'm just happy we can say the word on the radio right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, 10 years ago, I don't think we were hearing anything about it. So yes, menopause.
Yeah.
So if someone comes to you and they say, what's happening to me? What kind of things would you advise? Let's say, I don't know, let's say a 50-year-old woman.
So I'll walk you through our processes, if you will.
Yes.
So first and foremost, we need to stay in our lanes, because we're not prescribing pharmacists, we're not prescribing clinicians, and we're not doctors. So Tracy and I, as part of Helia Wellness, she is a behavior change specialist and coach, and I am a nutritionist. So staying in our lanes, we work with clients through the lens of behavior change, helping them sort of take action consistently so they can move the needle towards improved health and vitality. Because a lot of us know what we should do, but we fail to take action consistently.
I'm going to do those sit-ups today.
I know you will. I believe in you. And then myself as a nutritionist, I'm licensed, if you will, or I can speak to supplement or nutraceuticals within a certain spectrum. And I also talk about lifestyle medicine, dietary changes that can move the needle exponentially for thyroid, liver, adrenal, and gut health. We'll get into that as it relates to evolving hormones and menopause. And then just walking with them and keeping them accountable. So when women come to us and they enlist our services, they may have been tipped off from a girlfriend who had, rave results in working with the two of us, or they may just be at their wit's end, and they may have had, a scathing conversation with their acting physician, or one that was good, but it still had gaps in it. And a lot of women will come to us either looking to lose weight, because they're frustrated with that, meno belly, as it's termed, which I, loathe and detest.
Yes.
And they come to us with a host of different symptoms that they either link or don't link to this evolving hormonal landscape. So what we do is we walk them through a very, very thorough and comprehensive nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement assessment. If we feel they're candidates for HRT, hormone replacement therapy, we would then hand them over to a prescribing pharmacist or one of the clinicians, aka a doctor, Western medically trained or functional medicine doctor that specializes in hormone therapy.
Do you want to do a mini deep dive into HRT? Because I know in 2002 there was the
Women's Health
Initiative study that came to an abrupt end, and I was, that happened I remember that and thinking right away, well, you shouldn't take hormones. HRT is it's not good, and it's bad for women's health.
So thankfully that study has been tipped on its head, and we, like everything in science, a disclaimer, like everything in science, once we know better, hopefully we do better. And thankfully we have revisited that study and found many, many flaws in both the case studies or the subjects that were followed, in that they weren't good candidates, healthy candidates to perform this type of study on. And there was many, many flaws in that study. So we don't need to do a deep dive into that. The good news is that we now know better, therefore we can do better. And so many women, as this narrative is changing, now have the option of potentially exploring and considering using HRT. But the unfortunate part of it is there is this, great subject group of women whose health ailed needlessly as a result of buying into that belief system.
So you would assess whether not everyone's going to be a candidate for hormone replacement therapy or HRT. And if you feel they are, if a woman feels she might be, ask your doctor, find out more.
Yeah, a lot more women are candidates than they're led to believe. It's just the type of hormones that one chooses to go on, the dosing of the hormones, and the lifestyle management piece, which is huge.
What is lifestyle management?
So when we look at lifestyle management, we're talking about 5 different pillars. So the first ones we go through and we walk our clients through in Helia Wellness is nutrition for optimal metabolic health. And we can do a little dive into each of these after, if that interests listeners. Yes. So nutrition for optimizing metabolic, therefore digestive health, adrenal health, and so forth. The next is restoring healthy sleep cycles and circadian pathways.
Oh, is that possible?
Yes, it is. It is. Having struggled for a very long time myself. The next is stress resilience, which is kind of trending as well. Because stress is often demonized, but we need stress for survival. It's a necessity of life. It's just, unfortunately, our go button it's on far too often. So I know you and I have had conversations around adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
That's in quotes. We can do a light dive as to what that actually means and the proper clinical terminology and what's going on in your physiology as a result. So far we've got nutrition, we've got stress, and we've got sleep. The other one is movement. And last but not least is community.
Oh, surprise.
And we break community into 2 different conversations. First and foremost, it's the inner community. So the thoughts within that play like elevator music in our minds.
Oh, okay.
That I'm not good enough, that I need to, hustle and grind for everybody's validation. I'm here to serve the world and not myself because that would be selfish, and so forth. And then the other piece of community is our external community. So who we keep company with and who are our support systems and so forth. Because as women, and more so caregivers, we are so good at just giving our energy and time and love away and never really making those deposits back. So,
wow.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
5 big pillars.
So that's in essence our roadmap, if you will.
Okay, do you want to start with nutrition?
Let's do it.
Okay, so is it possible to get the hormones you need through food? And I remember thinking, if I'm going to be in menopause, I'm just going to eat edamame beans and I'll get all that soy and I'll get all that phytoestrogen and life will be good.
Such a fabulous question. And the simple answer is no.
Oh.
That's not to overwhelm or discourage women that are not open to hormone replacement therapy. Because again, as we said, certain women are not candidates or it just doesn't feel right for them, and that's okay. So no, you cannot replace those key sex hormones with food, but what you can do is optimize the organs and or the glands that secrete key hormones with food. Oh. Because food contains micronutrients, which are in essence vitamins and minerals.
So would there be a couple of, this will be a longer conversation at some point, but are there a couple of quick foods that you would highly recommend that every woman peri or postmenopausal eats?
Yeah, so, I'm more into personalizing recommendations, but if we just looked at, items that are going to serve all of us, the first one that comes to mind is protein. So protein is one of our macronutrients, again, trending as it has been for a very long time in nutrition science and in the wellness world. But why that's so important is not only from a nutrition perspective, and key amino acids are found within proteins. Amino acids serve our immune system. They help us build muscle, which protects our bones. They help sort of stave off any type of neurodegeneration and cognitive decline, and they help us stabilize our blood sugar level. And I'll add to that why those items are so important is with the loss of estrogen as our bodies age or reach that 51, 52-year mark, is we know that with loss of estrogen, all of those variables are implicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. Because I know, my own bone density, right? Bone density tanks.
Huge.
Yeah, and there's not much to do. Anyway, but I know HRT, I don't want to spend too much time at HRT. I know that can stave off, I think, bone density, bone loss, and also mental decline, right?
Yeah, and decrease one's risk of any type of cardiac event, like HRT. I'm pro HRT for sure.
Yeah, and I wish, but there's a window, right? There's a 10-year window from last period to starting HRT. Otherwise, the window closes. Is that? And I mean, I read a book, so
no, absolutely. Well, and it's fair, and there's so much information available, and because we're only starting in nutrition and in research to kind of change this narrative, I have to toe a really tight line on anything I say being tied to research and data and evidence.
Of course.
It's got to be evidence-based, but here's the good news, is that yes, once upon a time, we thought if we were going to do HRT back when, the Women's Health Initiative study was out, you could only do it for 10 years.
Yes.
Otherwise, you would invite so many of these risk factors into your life. Then the narrative changed, and it's like, oh, HRT is not so bad. You can actually do it, but you've only got 10 years after you stop menstruating. After you're in menopause, you've only got 10 years. Where the newest and latest and greatest research is kind of playing around is that it's not too late to do HRT at any age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
and
that's
that
a
would
big takeaway.
really come down to the prescribing clinician you're working with and their comfort level.
Of course.
And really staying on top of testing. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to look at sleep? You had me at sleep. Or is there anything else you want to say
Yeah,
about
I was going to
nutrition?
say there's a couple others I'll give to the listeners with respect to nutrition.
Okay.
An anti-inflammatory diet is key. So when we're talking anti-inflammatory diet, we're looking to revisit the power of whole foods, specifically fiber-rich fruits and vegetables. And why that is again, the loss of progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and DHEA, specifically the loss of estrogen, changes your gut health exponentially. So we are looking to feed those gut bugs that reside within our gut jungle, which we often coin the microbiome.
Yes.
We're looking to feed those little gut bugs tons and tons of fiber and foods rich in pre and probiotics. So fiber, probiotics, those are essential through an anti-inflammatory diet, which means sadly reducing or eliminating our intake of sugar, which is a tough one when we're straddling exhaustion and we're just looking for the quick hit to keep up with the demands of our life.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. And then I would say, seed cycling.
What's seed cycling?
So seed cycling is something you'll find trending in the holistic world as it relates to this conversation. But if we cycle, no pun intended, if we cycle back or circle back more so to your question about can you get these hormones in real foods, the answer is no. So you can certainly do seeds because they're rich in healthy fats, often omega-3 fats, which are great for stifling inflammation and helping gut health and any kind of neuro health or brain health. But you cannot seed cycle your way back to a premenopausal state.
Okay.
So in essence, to answer your question, you consume different types of seeds at different times of when your cycle would be.
Oh, okay.
Luteal phase, follicular phase, and so forth. Hard to do when you're not menstruating.
Yeah.
To discern what that looks
Yeah,
like.
well, is there even a cycle?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
there's the
right.
moon.
There's the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sleep?
Sleep.
Can you tell I'm very interested in sleep? Is it
Aren't we
possible?
all?
Yeah, sleep is sleep is the new drug.
Yeah. Well, we often say to any of the women we're working with, if you're not sleeping well, you're not doing anything well. And you and I have had this conversation time and again. And I know myself, I was probably an insomniac for 10 years and it was downright crippling. And unfortunately was a gateway to me contracting other diseases and ailments in my own health. So sleep, yes, you can improve it. Progesterone for me was a game changer. But that is not me prescribing progesterone on this podcast. So progesterone is known for its sedative effects, and that is where I'm pro HRT. It was an absolute game changer after I had tried everything on the market, but I can't emphasize the importance enough about sleep hygiene.
So is sleep hygiene not bringing your computer or your phone or your tablet into the bedroom and watching something before you go to sleep?
That is one of many attributes of sleep hygiene.
Okay.
Yes. And it's a real thing, because as long as your nervous system is activated, whether it's scrolling through your Facebook or Instagram feed, or, listening to an enlightening news segment right before bed, or, listening to a thriller podcast, what's the thriller podcast, the murder ones, what are they called?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. All of this stuff is going to awaken your nervous system. So in essence, you're confusing your brain and your body as to what you're asking of it in that moment. And it's spitting out usually an influx of cortisol. As long as cortisol is lifting at bedtime, it's going to stifle the release and or production of melatonin. So it's going to hamper both your quality of sleep and the duration of sleep. So that's a big, big one.
Is there, can teas help with that? I've been doing a lot of the herbal tea or tisanes.
Yeah, so teas can. So a lot of individuals like chamomile tea. And that works. I'm pro chamomile for sure. There are other teas you can consume throughout the course of the day just to maximize what your cortisol rhythm consists of throughout the latter half of the day. And that would be holy basil tea.
Oh yeah, Tulsi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nice. And there are certain other teas that women will take prior to bed just to help downregulate that nervous system. Because a lot of us find ourselves wired yet tired when our head hits the pillow.
Oh yeah.
We're downright exhausted, but we can't stop. The crazy brain, right?
Well,
we're just back and forth.
Well, I think that moves into stress, like the stress piece. And you and I have had many conversations about that because at one point, we both had our own companies. We both were raising a family, just being in the world, right? Driving, trying to stay informed, trying to be helpful, trying to meet all the,
And the expectations we have of ourselves, right? Which is a big one as women. So, so that definitely feeds into the stress piece for sure.
Now, I've just talked about the negative aspects of stress, but you said earlier when we were talking about stress that in fact we do need stress. Yeah.
The author's escaping me right now, but there's this brilliant book, and I believe it's called The Upside of Stress, and I wish I could remember her name.
We'll look it up.
Yeah, you got to love the menopausal brain. It doesn't come to you when you need it. But it's a really different perspective and spin on stress, because we often demonize stress. And here's the reality, is that it's not going away, right? The world is somewhat upside down, as I often say. And it's largely in our hands as to how our brains and how our behaviors want to navigate that. And we know there's so many things that are out of our control. Again, this comes back to the beauty and the importance of mindset work and really changing our perspective on stress. And we have one of two options in that moment, right? And we can either succumb to that fight or flight response and secrete a ton of stress hormones in that moment, which keep us in a holding pattern with poor gut health, weight gain, hot flashes, and so forth. Or we can choose to take a deep breath, practice the pause, and just ask ourselves, is it worth it? And I found that after reading that book, it really kind of reframed what stress means. And even as a presenter and a health educator, it helped me better walk with people during stressful times. Because going through this evolving, crazy hormonal landslide can feel stressful in and of itself. And we know that women simply don't deal with stress as well as we did in our 20s and 30s as a result of the loss of hormones or hormone decline.
Yeah, well, who does as we get older? Although I have to say, a lot of old people I know, older people, elders, don't get engaged.
Yeah, they don't get sucked into the vortex.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm hoping there's like some beautiful wisdom that gets turned on in a few years here.
Yeah, and I know for me where I'm at, it has to be an active choice because I haven't mastered it as a skill yet. And it's so easy for me just to get swept away again.
Well, when I was driving here, anyway, driving is always stressful for me. I'm that person. But I've started saying, okay, I'll get there safely and on time. And just even remembering to say that does something.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. And I think, definitely out of my lane of expertise, but yeah, what we put out to the world, we attract, right?
Yes.
So I know a lot of people look at these little practices as, quote unquote woo-woo, but I think there's merit
Works
to
for
it.
me.
It
Yeah.
does. And I think it changes that neuroplasticity in your brain and how you choose to show up for yourself. So it kind of, checks the self-care box too.
You had mentioned adrenal fatigue, and is that a thing?
If you bring up that term in Western medicine, often you'll get a little eye roll. So there are rare cases where your adrenals can, quote unquote, be fatigued, but that's actually a disease state, and it's termed adrenal insufficiency.
Okay.
Where adrenal fatigue was birthed is AKA burnout.
Oh, okay. So it's just it's synonym for burnout.
It's synonym for burnout, and that's how I explain it to clients. But the conversation is far more involved. So we have different axes throughout our body, and specific to adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency is your hypothalamus, located in your brain, your pituitary gland, located in your brain, and your adrenal glands, located on top of your kidneys. In essence, they're just stuck on an on position. And you're secreting far too many hormones or not enough at very inopportune times of the day. And as a result of that, we're often producing cortisol and or other adrenal hormones at very inopportune times of the day, linking back to our wired and tired state, where we feel like we're just never getting ahead and we're constantly pushing that boulder up a steep hill. And the thought of taking care of ourselves, it's like, are you kidding me? I can barely slog through my day. So that's kind of where adrenal fatigue was, birthed.
It's really interesting you said that, take care of myself, I can hardly get through my day. I've been there. I think you've
myself,
been there.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's so interesting that puts yourself last on the list. So I'm wondering, you talked about the next pillar being community. Let's talk a bit about that. I was very intrigued with the inside community. Inside Voice is a community. So interesting.
So I would say two of the people I would turn to that are experts in this field, beyond my dear business partner, Tracy Fisher. Tracy often references the work of Brene Brown. And, love her or not, her work is brilliant in that I think she really speaks to the human affect of perfectionism, of which I know I can claim.
I think we're
as
both
a billboards.
recovering perfectionists.
I'm like, is that a thing? Okay, I'm making it a thing. Right? Because in many respects, it's a bit of an addiction. Right? It's just, how far can I push the needle? How hard can I drive here? And so forth. And I think it works until it doesn't, to sound very aloof. And so I think Brene Brown has done a brilliant job of normalizing this conversation and furthers it with speaking to shame and how that hinders our future growth and keeps us stuck. And then the other individual is Kristen Neff, and she's big on self-compassion. And, in the world of fitness, people will often enlist a trainer, for example, to yell at them and like scream reps out to them and show them how to do a said exercise. Personally, for me, it's not how I work with clients, and I would not pay anybody money for that. But I think we are so conditioned to beat the hell out of ourselves, whether it's related to diet mentality and deprive ourselves of all things good and punish ourselves in the gym as a means of, achieving a said look or a certain state of health. I think that flows and kind of bleeds into so many different parts of life. So the thought with Kristen Neff is if you can exercise a bit more self-compassion and grace, maybe you could love yourself into a healed state, into a restored state, into more of a fiscally responsible state, and so forth. Does that kind of, does that make sense? Does that
I love
resonate?
that, because you're kind of, preaching to the choir here. But I, personally, that has made such a difference in my life. Just the idea that I can be kind to myself.
Yeah.
That was revolutionary a few years ago.
Well, and we all have this drill sergeant, right, that we adopted or we learned through our family of origin, or we picked it up through media or through the social construct of the narratives that we're exposed to. But the more you sit with that, and I know David Goggins would, argue this point time and time again with me, but I think the more you can cut yourself slack without deluding yourself, I think you're more inclined to have success at whatever that task or goal is. Because I think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, I think if you do your best, my husband says, all you can do is all you can do.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And it's often more than what we're led to believe we're capable of. It's just at what cost. And as women, we are notorious for just pushing those boundaries, push. And then we receive some type of ailing diagnosis, and we act surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, but it feels good in the moment to overachieve.
Sure does, because it's a dopamine hit, right?
It is. It
floods
is.
your pleasure centers.
Yeah.
So it's a thing we get addicted to, which is why I jokingly say I'm a recovering perfectionist, because it's a neurochemistry hit, especially as a ADHDer, which is, right, I have that neurodiverse brain. So I'm really, I have to really toe a tight line personally. Yeah.
So that's community, interior community. You also spoke about the importance of who you surround yourself with, which is like honestly something my mother would say.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
I say it to my kids, right? And it's like, oh yeah, novel thought. But I think one thing I would say is time and again with the women's groups we work with, almost every single woman has come back and said, I feel like I can now take a deep breath because I realize I'm not alone. And as prideful women who are successful and very educated and well-researched, it is amazing that we still struggle often to lean into a female community that can hold us up, embrace us, and walk with us on this journey. And I know for me, I'm only getting the value of that now in life. And perhaps this has something to do with being raised with wolves and boys.
Yeah, you were raised by wolves.
Right, but it's really interesting just to sit back and walk with these women on their journey and hear time and again just how thankful they are for being surrounded with women who are also being vulnerable enough to share, courageous enough to share, or who have shared, a similar, ailment, because they often think that they're alone. So I think there's huge value in surrounding yourself with people who align with your values and are of like-mindedness, and further to that, kind of up or elevate your game. The whole surround yourself with excellence. If you are an innately curious woman and you look to get the most out of this life. So
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering about family and community. I know women who have, great big families, and I know, women that are mostly alone. So I don't really know what my question is, but is there any research about kind of family support? About family support, I'm not sure. Okay.
And, it's escaping my mind, unfortunately, but Tracy often shares this one research study, and I can't remember what culture it's involving, but in essence it just talks about the power of being around our elderly, specifically our elderly women. It's coming to you, and just the power in that and how it can literally feed the soul. And I think COVID did a really brilliant job of illustrating how deflating and how degrading that isolation can be on one's health, and how quickly our health can unravel when we feel like we're alone or isolated. So specific to family, I don't know, but I would say the importance of surrounding yourself with a community of like-minded women and people who are lifting you up, I think is a really, really important piece of our overall vitality. And the acknowledgement that sometimes we just grow out of certain relationships, whether it be friends or family.
So to distance from that, move toward the light.
Yeah, give yourself permission.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know a lot of women, even in our age bracket, are still, confronted with that. So, yeah.
So those are the 5 pillars. Was there where do you want to go from here? We've covered a lot of really great stuff, Dawn. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, if listeners took anything away from this podcast, I would say, number one, you're worth it. Number two, get educated and reach out to a credible resource that you trust in. There's a great deal of information being shared on different social media platforms, and a ton of great research happening in this field of well-being. But Tracy and I both feel that women have been underserved specific to hormonal health for far too long. And again, the narrative is, well, we're getting old, so this is all just part of aging. But we really invite each and every woman to push back on that. And we're here to do some pretty cool work as women on this earth. So it's like, get curious, take care of yourself, and reach out, because there's so much research and there's so much you can do through restoring gut health, adrenal health, liver health, whether or not you pursue HRT.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many, I'm very excited about what's next in life, where this wisdom comes from, as you mentioned. Find older women that you admire and hang out with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would attribute, a large part of my success and growth to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has there been any great books you would want to recommend? I know your books, your reading is probably very scientific and focused to your work, and which is great. I mean, you recommended a book to me on estrogen that I read.
That one's brilliant, actually. That one, I believe, was Estrogen Matters.
Yes.
The author is escaping my mind at the moment.
We can find it and put it on the...
Yeah, the reason I like that one, Carrie, is because it really kind of flips everything that we've been led to believe about HRT on its head. For example, taking HRT causes breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And that one's still a controversial one.
Oh, yes.
So it really does. I found it relatively easy to read.
Yeah, and I'm not a person who enjoys a science book. I'm not Dawn Hart.
Well, as I say, most people, it's a good nap, right? Let's be honest, that most people glaze over. But I found that one relatively easy to kind of digest and sink your teeth into. There's kind of conflicting views, and then whether or not you're an athlete, looking at hormones through that lens. So I would really encourage listeners to start with Estrogen Matters. Okay. Yeah.
And I have one final question. I'm curious about, and as you know, I'm very interested in the maternal line and how we become the women we are today, and what's inherited wisdom, how have our mothers influenced our journey? Do you want to speak to that at all? Like, is there something your mother taught you, or that really resonated with you that maybe you'll pass on down your line? I guess conversely, things you want to let go of, but
I'm very blessed in that I have an amazing mother, and she taught myself and my brothers the value of hard work, but more so, she taught us the values of living in alignment with your values and being a good person, and being kind, and being heart-focused and heart-centered. And that has allowed me to turn inward in times of crisis and really recalibrate quickly and follow a course of path and action that feels genuine for me.
That to me is secret heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tune into your secret heart.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful, because I think that's one of the lingering stressors for so many women. And we just don't even think about it, is when we're living out of alignment with our values and what feels authentic and right, that's a stressor in the system, and it's hijacking your hormones.
What a great conversation, Dawn Hart. Thank you so much for coming down to the studio today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
You are so welcome.
Yeah.